if you start allowing somebody or a large corporation to dictate the estate, whether it's your own personal estate or the online estate, we're really going to set an entirely low standard for what we deserve in this new space. And this new space is supposed to be like anybody can have space, and anybody can really create these case studies of like their aesthetic, what they can build, the world that they idealize.
Hello to our amazing NewForum community. We are always excited to bring you inspiring creators, visionaries, and investors to spark conversations on the new perspectives on the topics of crypto, the Metaverse, NFTs, Social 3.0, and DAOs. Today's episode focuses on the super industrial and spatial designer Hanna Ali, who is known for making an influence in the architectural and spatial design space.
Hanna creates virtual and real-life spaces for users to experience and connect. She also works on designs for well-known artists such as Diplo, Kanye West, and many more. She's building her own architectural design community called Hoechitecture, an online community to promote young women to take up space. We are super excited to have you with us today, Hanna.
Thank you for having me.
So I actually came across your work, Hanna, on Instagram, and I was super excited, to see a young female designer in the architectural world. And it was super great. Like, it would be super great to hear from you, like what's inspired your journey into this space and what inspires your work.
So I think like it's fun when people come across my Instagram for the first and foremost part, because it's like a bunch of colors. And like, I really strongly believe that like as a woman designer, like woman architect that it shouldn't stick to like the quota of like always wearing all black and like diminishing ourselves to like this colorless version. And I think that all of these like color theories that I have going on like really play into part because I started off as a painter, like at a very, very young age. And then from going from painting to when somebody looks at a painting, they're like, okay, well, cool, like that person can paint, but you're not really immersed in that person's story or narrative. And for me, I always had these like really crazy ideas, and people would, kind of sounds like a little bit unbelievable with them. So I just like strove for this like level of realism, whether it was in painting or learning how to model or learning, different type of render engines. I just like always strove for that thing to look realer and realer and realer. And that meant like the spaces got grander, and there was never really like a play on the aesthetic portion for me. It was always kind of like inherent.
Yeah, it looks really like, inspiring and natural, and you can see that you have different influences. There's like kind of like a retro future wave within the designs, and that what got me attracted as well to the page.
You mentioned that you want to make things realer and realer, and I think it's sort of your personality speaks that as well, because you had an issue this morning, and something about your office burning or whatnot, and then you still showed up, and you're making it work. And so that speaks a lot about, who you are. And I think we see that in your work as well. And we appreciate that about you. So, I read something about you, and it said you you started off wanting to be a sneaker designer. I found that really interesting. And somehow you go into this whole architectural thing, and then you're in the 3D space. So like, that's quite interesting. How did all that pan out for you?
That's funny. Because I used to like write in my notebook. Write in my notes and stuff. I was like, I will become like the next creative director of Nike. Like I used to religiously write this, I think like every single day of my high school career. And that was because it was the closest thing familiarity wise that I had to a large scale creative director. And in my high school, I studied industrial design because I went to this very design high school, which is like super unique for somebody like at a young age. It's kind of like Euphoria, but for designers on like a low scale. It was a very odd way to like channel your like teen emotions into like being a designer. But at that age, you're still really developing like who you are, and so the representation in the world, not to sound like so cliche, but it really matters. And so like that was the only thing that I really knew and could relate to without having somebody tell me, okay, well, you want to create big ideas, but okay, like what is the biggest idea I could think of, and what is the most seen idea? And to me, like Nike was one of the most seen brands, and they had the coolest stores, they had the coolest activations, they had the coolest sneakers, and I really like sneakers for the way that sneaker culture and like the design of a sneaker can go into almost any type of demographic, whether it's like the hood or like a super luxury ass demographic or anything, but it like really broke all barriers. So yeah, that's why I used to want to be a sneaker designer, and then it kind of just like moved up a lot. Yeah, I got really crazy.
That's awesome. Super interesting. Yeah.
I love that, you have a very diverse background and upcoming, and being into these different spaces almost reminds me of, I used to follow a lot of like June Amber's story, and it's really nice to see a woman designer, reaching for bigger levels and really like being representative within the space. So let's talk a bit about Hoechitecture, a quite interesting name. I'm sure our audience are curious and would love to know the meaning behind it and also the intention from forming this community.
So Hoechitecture was initially started because I used to call my personal style Ho adjacent. I was like, okay, I'm from Miami, so everything is like hypersexualized. Like, I mean, to the nines, like BBL, like Brazilian body and Spanish sexuality, all of these things. And so to me, that was a part of my culture growing up where I didn't understand why I couldn't create beautiful things and also look like a beautiful woman, because it was too distracting, whether it was distracting for men or for other women. So I used to say like, wow, I want to post this on my Instagram, but I can't post this on my Instagram because I'm worried about how certain people in like the academic world will look at me. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll be Ho adjacent. Like I'll post in front of a building and I'll post a little bit, thirst trap-esque, but I'll like always border that line of like when to push it too far. And then I don't know how I started like coming up with the word Hoechitecture, but it came from that. And that's still what I used to call my personal style, because I was like, okay, well, I can post pictures of myself if I have colored hair, because the selfie feels a little bit more artistic. And it feels like I'm standing for something. And then I can also post pictures of myself if I'm aligning myself with a beautiful building or a beautiful location. It's like basically putting yourself in context of a space. And it's like curating your personal image, like as if Athena would do with war. Like, so Athena is like usually depicted in all her sculptures and her paintings as if she has like these certain symbols of, like war and wisdom, like holding a book or holding some sort of weaponry. And one day somebody asked me, like, why? I thought that was an Instagram page already. Like, why don't you make it an Instagram page? I was like, because like I thought that Instagrams were like cliche or like corny. And then I ended up just making it a page, and I wasn't that consistent at first, but the more I've been making it a page, it's like the more that it's been working out for me in terms of it's doing its job. I made it so that I could find other people like me and find other people like me to work on projects, to find other people like me around the world to have these like unique conversations with, and not feel like I'm always in some sort of like skeptical job interview with like a man, or like it just feels very weird when I share ideas. And I also have to worry about, does this person want to date me, or this person, I didn't want to have that. So I couldn't find my community. So I made, and so like Hoechitecture is, I try to separate it from my personal image sometimes, just so that it feels like more of a collective thing and not like a ownership thing.
So I love that. Yeah. Because, oftentimes as well, when you are working in like let's say a design space or in a high demanding job, and you have to bring out a project, people expect almost like more from the woman, or you kind of feel like you have to deliver more or do more because you are a woman. And I love that you just created your own kind of aesthetic in your own wave, and now people are coming to you for things. And I think that's really inspiring.
You sort of gave it a purpose, the intention that sort of drew you into coming up with this whole concept. I feel like it's just, it resonates with me as well, as a person. It's like if you can't find a place, you create the space, and I think you did that really well. And I just love that people can freely, women can freely express themselves, without worries, without worrying about judgments and all that stuff. So that's pretty great. And I read an article about you, and you mentioned, so I'm going to quote what you said. You said, "This idea of metaverse and 3D world building online is a new way to experience virtual architecture." So I'm wondering, can you tell us more about this 3D world building in the metaverse and how the metaverse impacts your work as a designer?
First and foremost, am really, maybe some of your viewers can help, but I really want to find a new word for the metaverse, because I think it is the most cringe, so
Right.
cringe of a word. It sounds very masculine. I don't know, something about the letters.
Metaverse, right?
It just sounds so cringe. But I used to say 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know what the metaverse was. I just used to call it virtual travel, because when I was making these renders, I was like, well, what if we could just explore the renders? You know what I mean? It takes so many steps and so many barriers of breaking into architecture to physically build something. A lot of those times, those things don't need to be permanent structures, and they're temporary, and then a lot of it goes to waste. And so thinking of somebody in terms of a digital avatar and how we're now experiencing spaces is usually somebody will travel and somebody will go take a picture in a place, and that moment will only exist in a picture. So I had this whole theory, I think about 4 years ago, that what if we only ever built virtual spaces and people could superimpose them in the background? And it's kind of like this collector trading system of being able to experience all these online spaces and merge them with your physical self. And those would then be a representation of these spaces that you would like to occupy in the future, but maybe not be accessible to you in your current location, or that just doesn't look like that right now in the world. But as far as the metaverse getting more popular, I'm really excited about it, because I think for a long time I have been waiting to have certain conversations with people, and this is my own downfall of waiting to have conversations with people about virtual travel or about all of these things until the pop culture kind of caught up to it, so that they would be able to understand the conversation. So now that there's becoming more public familiarity to it, I think that it's an exciting time for me to be able to get more investments in projects, and not also have people looking at me nobody's going to virtually travel to this. What? These ideas sounds outlandish. And now I think people are starting to recognize okay, we do spend a majority of our time online, and also these spaces should just act as something as inspiration. It should also act almost like a sim city simulation, where you can set up a certain group of people or a certain scenario and see how it pans out online before actually building it in the physical world. I think that's all going to be super unique. That also reminds me, sometimes I forget that I'm moving into a new title of my career, which is being a world builder. And when I used to call myself a world builder, I thought that it was very that I was doing too much. But then I realized that I was making myself too small by calling myself an architect or an industrial designer, because I really didn't resonate with any of those things, because my scope of work is so varied, and I like to create the people. Hoechitecture is me creating the people in a place that I think will interact. The stage designs are stages and operating with music. The buildings are something else. The creative direction is something else. So really I'm creating a world of things that people would exist in. So world building is really like on our next level of things. And world building we see like similarly with like what set designers do in movies, and they, you know, they really design things on a variation of scale. So I think like that's how we have to operate as designers in the like coming decades.
It sounds like you've identified all the, you know, the great potentials of this space. And I'm curious to know if you've also thought about like, you know, potential, you know, the pros and cons, you know, of it, like what could be the potential negatives of the metaverse?
I think like the potential cons in the metaverse would be certain things of like isolation. I think I also see that a lot, and it's why I don't resonate with virtual reality, because virtual reality is a singular experience. So how I'm thinking of the metaverse is like we should be buying more projectors or like investing in projectors more than we invest into headsets. Or I mean, like I'm a fan of HoloLens just because like you have this like connection to the real world and the virtual world. But I think that these things need to merge before we just like indulge ourselves as these like online avatars, and kind of like give up our identity in ways like, so I think it's important that we understand why our personal and our like real life identity is so important before investing something that's like fully online. I also think like in the virtual world, it's going to be a lot of like advertisement. Being able to, and I think this is like another unique part about like Hoechitecture or my own projects, is like defining who you are as a designer or creator or anything like that before pimping yourself out to some sort of company, has been really important, because like I am quit that job. Like if I don't like that job, I'm quitting that job. Like I am leaving, like, and I always like push everybody to leave their job if they don't like it, because I think that the world is just like so big of ideas that if you start allowing somebody or a large corporation to dictate the estate, whether it's your own personal estate or the online estate, we're really going to set an entirely low standard for what we deserve in this new space. And this new space is supposed to be like anybody can have space, and anybody can really create these case studies of like their aesthetic, what they can build, the world that they idealize. And I think with creating an online world and just like showing these scenarios, it's basically like creating like an online sci-fi world. So you can really showcase so many different things, but you know, there can be like some evil in a sci-fi book, or it really has a spectrum of like pros and cons, but it's the same as like what we would do in the real world. It just has like new additive visuals and like also new like buying space. So with anything that has new ability to be purchased comes with like a new responsibility.
Right. You touched on a lot of great points. You know, like first of all, the decentralization makes so much possible for people around the world. Like anyone from anywhere can join this, like what you call world building, as well as something that we care about at NewForum Foundation, which is, you know, being passionate and about what you do or your work. Like our job is based on creativity and, you know, finding people who have the right skills and do what they love with passion, and that's why they extend, you know, that's why they will go far, because they're best with what they're doing. And also what you said about, you know, you have to have substance in the real world. Like you cannot just be an avatar or pretend that you're someone or whatever, but then, you know, you have to have some kind of substance in your work and what you're doing. Many great points that you just made. So I have another question for you. I was wondering, you know, you worked with a couple of really well-known artists, and such as Diplo, Kanye West, and I'm wondering, do you think that artists right now are aware of all of this happening? Like, do you think they are aware of the metaverse space? Do you think like they are considering the possibilities of Web3 and all of that? What is your thoughts?
I laugh because like I guess now it's become my thing to work with a lot of like very large artists. But I think like one of my favorite artists to work with is Aluna, who is you know, like kind of this like electronic singer and DJ. She is so privy to like all of this stuff. She even had like a performance in Decentraland, all of these things, and her world that I worked on for her stage designs was really one of the most unique worlds I was able to work on in my whole career, because there was so many different levels of details that we could get to, and we set like different locations and whatever. So she really got a handle on this stuff. But I do think that it's sometimes the smaller artists, she's not that small, but like large, not like the most mainstream artists who have like a better handle on the actual community and are really out there. And then sometimes the mainstream artists kind of like try to do this catch-up game. But and like whether it's an artist like a musician or a designer or any sort of large platform person is very used to being in their formula of what works. Okay, I'm gonna make music, I'm gonna make clothes, I'm gonna make certain things, or even paintings. I'm gonna make these things and I know that this formula works. And sometimes it's easy to get stuck in like the daily life of their formula and not necessarily be out there searching for this innovation. And also it's like, you know, is this innovation going to stick around? Is it not? Is a hard point to see where they should invest their time into. And just like when a regular artist comes posed with the question of like using new tools on Instagram or any online platform, they're posed with, okay, like, am I going to make an Instagram reel? So like to them, like a large artist, like building a NFT or a metaspace is like as either potentially cringe or as new to them as like a regular person making an Instagram reel. Like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Is it going to look weird? Like, are people going to be receptive? Am I going to be clowned for it? My favorite thing to like recommend to the people with larger communities is because they already have a platform to really like go into the mode of like creating a DAO or creating something that they can actually utilize their platform, since people are already proven to show up. Like, you know, don't create an NFT necessarily because you want to make money or because it's the new like hot topic word, but like actually utilize your platform so that you can curate a bunch of people who are already doing these things and move more into like this mode of collaboration and not, okay, well, I'm going to tackle this new industry and I'm going to make something that doesn't necessarily resonate with my brand, but I'm going to do it because it's a hot topic. But I do think that I think like the media has been doing a good job of like publicizing all this like new innovation and like these new innovative words, like, but mainstream artists, they're aware of it, but sometimes there's a bit of hesitance to whether or not they're actually going to participate or not, because connecting to those creators is the hard part. Finding people like all of us in this chat, or finding people who do 3D, or finding people who do like futurism concepts and theories and business strategies is a hard part, because we're so used to people being trained to do regular skills in a workplace or even regular skills in 3D, that they're looking for people who are more multifaceted, and just connecting to those people, since they are in these like worlds of like fame and luxury and all of these things. It's much easier to find a fashion designer. It's much easier to find somebody to help you with fashion. It's much easier to find a photographer. But now you're looking for the nerds, really. Like, you're looking for the nerds who like do not necessarily go out of their house. Like, you're looking for people who have been like talking crazy shit like all the time, that would typically get overlooked. And now we're in a position to like start merging with like that pop culture life. And like, I'm excited for that. Like, I really like everything merging with pop culture, because that's where the real audience is. And like even something like Bored Ape and like Bored Ape Yacht Club, like they got popular off of a nerd community, and then the gamer community is also like that nerd pop culture, and then like they got popular with all of these like rappers and different celebrities and stuff, but really it was taken to the next level when pop culture and their community just grew so large.
I think this is so interesting what you just said, you know, because kind of when you have a bigger artist, they might lose touch with the pop culture or the youth culture that you just said, and then you know trying to play that catch-up game or make a Discord too, it's not that easy as it seems like. And also that is why we are so excited, because now the everyday creator who has been doing that for years, maybe in their bedroom or you know in their home studio, can actually be the main owner or be the main attraction, you know, and can really contribute to this new space because there's less barriers to entry. And now the real creatives come out to play. I think that's it's a really interesting perspective you have on that. And I'm wondering as well, social media is probably like a very present factor in your day-to-day life as it is with us. And you mentioned something about creativity in social media. So I'm wondering, what do you think about the current state of social media and how is it affecting your creativity?
Some days it's like really harder than others because I swear, like every day that I post a Hoechitecture post and it's just getting like hundreds and hundreds of likes, I'm like, okay, I'm like scrolling to see who's liking it because I want to like see who are these new people, because clearly if you're fucking with this post or you're fucking with the page, like you have similar interests as me. So I'm like really keen on trying to see who's like following with it. But now as the page is growing and like each post is getting, you know, upwards of 1,000 likes, I'm like, okay, I can't go through 1,000 people every day and on my actual personal page. But I have recognized all of January, I've really been taking the month to like do research and like also set my intention for the rest of the year. And I've been able to have so many interesting conversations with people who I don't know or who are across the world. And, you know, these are people who will like text me their resume or like that we're sharing this stuff, but it's like not in some I want to work. It's just like, here are my set of skills. Like, do you have topics that you're interested in? And really being able to create like wholehearted conversations and not things that are just like absent, not things that are just like responding back to a story or responding back to hard eyes or something, or you know, like empty congratulations. It's like, oh, okay, I saw you posted this. I'm really interested in like depthening your conversation with that, and I'm always looking for things that deepen my conversations with anything that I'm making and seeing like the different perspectives of that. So to me, that has been like a really amazing part of social media. Of course, there's always just like those triggers of like checking notifications or checking things because it's like it's a stopping game. It's like I also had this like astrologer just tell me that like I'm a seeker of truth, but I'm not like an uncoverer. So that means that like I will constantly keep looking for something, but I'm never gonna take anything as the answer. So like there's always gonna be like this wheel game of like the wheel will never stop turning. So like I can just scroll and search and search and search for hours, but like really the answer is only gonna come out of myself and whatever I make and whatever I synthesize. That's the information. So like my whole thing this year is gonna like be a stopping game of like knowing when to put the phone down or when to stop talking to people and like just be more active on creating, actually like creating and exploiting the information instead of just like continuing the social wheel.
Right, you can be there for hours, but you might not get anything out of it. But then when you go to the park or you go to a new place, you get so many inputs and it fuels your creativity. And I think it's great that you say you have to be mindful about like how you interact with it. You know, now that it's getting more and more, it's really important that we are a bit disciplined, I guess, about how we use it.
Yeah, and I wanted to add that it's really great that you have this, because you know most of the time the struggles people have with the current social 2 platform, aside not getting the right value for their like content, you know, especially with like artists and stuff like that, it also has this like one directional concept where, you know, it's really hard to kind of get feedback from your followers and stuff like that. And so you're just posting things and people are liking and it's like quite vague. So it's really nice that you kind of touch on the point that you kind of get to have this type of interaction with your, I guess, with your followers, you know, because your page is very specific and it seems like it's attracting the right people on there, you know, who come with a purpose and have sort of, like he said, similar aesthetics and I guess maybe values. And so it makes like for a deeper conversation and interaction in this space. So that's really great. And I wanted to ask you, what has your experiences been, if you care to share, like venturing into the, like, well, I hate to say it, but venturing into a male dominant space and becoming the first female virtual architect? Like, we're looking forward to that. And also, what kind of like mental cultural shift do you want to see?
I think it has been like really interesting because I'm coming into it at a young age. So it is very like the progression of myself in the industry has also been able to be like very malleable because and flexible to like what my idea is of a woman and what my idea is of a woman in the industry, because as I'm changing, I'm also like aging. Like as I'm changing in my career paths, I'm also like aging. So like whereas I might be when I was 20 years old, I'm like, okay, well, I'm only 20. So like, who cares? You know, like I'm very forgiving at times, maybe not in the short term, I'm not forgiving with myself, but like in the long term, I'm mostly forgiving with myself of like, okay, well, that was a mistake. Okay, well, you left the architecture firm. Okay, well, you're 21. Like, who cares? Like was a lot of like my energy towards things of like, okay, well, I'm young. So like, I do think that there's like a level of women who have been in this space maybe longer, who've been having like theses about certain things in this space, but they're a little bit older, so it's a little bit harder to be like forgiving with yourself or flexible in culture. But I think like I grew up with like, I don't know, like I really liked video vixens and stuff, and like so I really liked just like this energy that they gave and the presence that they own the room, which is like also why I'm saying like Hoechitecture is both something to push women in architecture, but also importantly it's supposed to push just women in general to take up space and to like have contagious energy in a space that doesn't mean like you necessarily have to design the space, but it's just like when you walk into a room, you have that presence and you own it. Like my name is on the building type of thing. And I think like at times I would make myself smaller, and this is always still like a work in progress, but I would make myself smaller in situations because I thought, okay, well, if they're telling me, then they must be right. Or like, it is so like primitive to like feel this like male domination in a way, and think like, okay, well, like they're the protector, or they're the provider, or they're the strong one. So like, maybe I should listen to them, or maybe they are right. So like knowing in ways when to speak up, and then also like knowing in ways like when you are just like threatening them. There's like a lot of times where I've like changed either my look or changed how I've acted because I didn't necessarily feel comfortable in the space. And this is still something that I'm like moving away from. It's like always an ongoing thing, but now I'm just like, wow, after meeting like so many super intelligent women on Hoechitecture and just like over the past year of seeing what I can accomplish, it's a lot harder to sway my mindset to think that they're the ones who are right, because like women do have this level of like divine femininity and empathetic design. So we do have like this forgiving factor both within ourselves and in design, and also understanding on like a motherly level what should be going on in design, in a space, in a relationship. And I think that there have been like things over time that have like made us feel guarded in ways. I've like been noticing like a lot of parallels, whether it's in like my personal relationships to like how I design in a more industry or corporate setting. I don't design corporate, but like I don't know what the proper word is. And like being able to like literally become a better person in your personal life will make you a better designer in your actual life. And I think those are things that like a lot of men like later understands, and like they understand when they're at like crossroads hitting 30 or something, that they've already pushed these barriers of like being comfortable in their work life, and then they're like, okay, spiritually I'm not in tune, and so like they do these things after the fact. But like as a woman, you're doing these things on like almost an everyday cycle, because like those things aren't allowed. Like you are not necessarily always allowed to have that bad day, or you're not allowed to like trip out on somebody, or not allowed to have this like moodiness. But really like all of those things come with like intuition and intention. And I don't know if this is like veering too much off of the question that you asked, but it has been a more than like one instance scenario. So it's like really a personal problem. Like it's like every woman's like personal problem in the industry of like how to battle these things, and not just like certain cases of like, okay, well this happened this way, and it's all related because it's all, you still feel the same way. It's not like, oh, okay, well this happened with this person and then it happened in a totally different way with this person. It's like actually everything shares this pattern, and it shares it both in your work life and in your personal life. So that has kind of been my learning curves as a designer.
I like that you touched on, you know, the feminine strength, you know, like we have this nurturing ability. I think you used the word mother, like motherly, I think, but, you know, having this nurturing energy that it's like, it's just part of us, it's part of who we are. And I love how you said, you know, finding that balance, you know, and being able to walk into a space with confidence. I think that's something most women need, you know, need to be reminded, you know, to do that more often. And just sort of, I just think that it's really great that you also said then also find that moment, those moments where you should listen, you know. And so I think it's really great that, you know, you have this balance within your own experience and your own relationships.
I want to add to that. I really love the fact that you point out how important it is to give people space, and to give people a space that is comforting. You know, if you're a woman, or if you anyone else, like sometimes in life there's the struggle of not fitting in, or you know, you have to adhere to certain rules and you have to fit into a space. But when you give people actually the okay to be themselves and to show up and to be different, it really makes a difference, you know, when you put a fish into a glass bowl, or if you put him into the ocean, how far people can go. And the same I think is for women. If we have representation, and if we have people in the space who can actually say yes, like that's who we are and that's what we do, and we can take all that space, then, you know, it's going to amplify. I think that is what I also like to see, you know.
Hanna needs to totally connect with Nastia, one of our team members. Like as you speak, there's just this vibe about you that makes me think about her. And so we have to totally connect you two.
Speaking on Nastia, who is heavy into DeFi on our team, I wanted to talk about the financial aspects about decentralization. And you mentioned that you know, DAOs, and maybe you can briefly say, what do you think is our issues right now within the design or creative industry space, and what are the potentials for NFTs, DAOs? What do you think about that?
I think that it's exciting because one, I also don't know, like I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, I want to do like some sort of like money tracking thing of like, where the hell is this money like really coming from? I mean, it's coming from some like man in some workplace. I don't know who's getting like overpaid, and then like, you know, it's like trickling into all of the like crypto markets of the financial system. But I'm like, yeah, like where is this coming from? But okay, anyways, I'm thinking that like the prices that people are going to get paid off of these like more decentralized markets, when a creator is able to put something out into the virtual space or into an NFT market, they're going to get paid an extreme amount more than they would get paid at a regular job. And that is because like at these regular jobs, and I can't also like hate on them all times, because things are expensive to do. And also like if you want a cool project, sometimes whoever you're working with is not used to the certain price point that it's at, so you have to like set things at a cheaper price to get like the case study project done, basically. which is like a little bit hard. But I think that with like the raise of seeing, it's almost like a new market of like a financial system that we're not currently in. So like we're also used to, in whether it's American dollars or like regular money, like inflation, and also like just paying people not proper wages, that when we're seeing a whole new financial system being created of people being paid properly, and also like people hitting this like lottery standpoint, that's kind of what crypto is right now. It's like it's getting like a lottery. It's like, okay, well, I can also hold this money, and this money is going to like raise in value. I think like what I'm most interested in right now, and it's like something that I've been thinking about for a while, is like a lot of women in like this like very seeking arrangement escort business, or like just like how, you know, we're commonly like, okay, well, like I'm gonna get a sugar daddy, or I'm gonna do all these things. Like I think it's like a thing in like every woman's like mind that you at least joke about that one time in your life. Like, oh my God, I just wish I had a sugar daddy. I'm really interested in seeing like how maybe somebody can like really trick that out, or like how maybe a girl will be able to be like, okay, well, instead of buying these like purses and these bags, so like I want this NFT, or I want this like art piece, or I want you to buy me a certain stock prices or something, because it is like a hot topic for guys. So if you as a girl are kind of into it, they're like, oh my God, she wants that. Like that you can be creating this like new financial system for yourself, or also like how to hide certain money as like an escort or anything, like because you get paid mostly cash, like being paid in like this kind of like very black market-esque way. Like that's what I'm interested in. It's not necessarily the question you asked, but like that is what I'm on right now, is like this like bad bitch economy of things. I'm also interested in like not knowing where all the money is like going or where it's coming from, which is like the exact decentralization aspect. But also like I'm not familiar with the term DeFi, decentralization of finances.
Yeah, exactly. So basically all of the crypto products are part of DeFi, and also things like smart contracts. So people kind of, we see it kind of like this at NewCoin, that in the future creators are going to have their own pools, and then the fans, like almost like on Patreon, but their fans can now stake into the pool and earn like ownership, and also earn staking money, you know.
Yeah, my friend is actually doing a lot of that stuff where he's like creating different coins and things like that, or like he has his own personal coin. Like right now, I don't know what the necessarily like. That's also goes back to the question of like, when do celebrities know when to do something? Like also the personal person of like knowing when that this certain like innovation tool is right for your market, but also not being too late on it and not being too early on it is huge. So like for Hoechitecture, do I make a coin? It's like, what is the additive benefits of like making a coin or making some sort of social token? It's unique, but then also if it's not applicable, it's hard to like hold up that community to that standard to create it as like a sustaining business model when you're also trying to do other things and you're at like a small team. So I think that finances is really like what runs basically everything and like creates limitations of creation. So I'm like, I'm also down to just like put these things out as case studies just so people get more familiar with them, whether or not they like fail or succeed. I know I did like a 360 or like a 180 in that conversation, in that whole sentence.
No, honestly, like this is the best part about it, you know, because you're speaking on something that we discuss right now. Is it making sense for small creators to have their coins, or, you know, how do we sustain these things, you know, user experience? Like today I wanted to connect my wallet to some Adidas NFT project and it was failing all the time, and I'm like, how can we make the barriers for people, or like for us and for people smaller, so we can actually benefit from decentralization and DeFi, you know? Like you said, if it's working out or not, that's easy, but you can see with NFTs right now, I don't think NFTs are going to go anywhere very soon. I think they're here to stay, and we will see how the other things play out, but it's very interesting.
I think like that was the whole thing that me and my friends used to talk about, is like NFTs and just like create it, like uploading yourself to one of these platforms like Foundation or OpenSea or whatever. Like, these are not easy tasks. Like, they're very like, they don't have a lot of instructions. They're very like cryptic in their manner. And so it is like kind of a gatekeeping sort of way of like, okay, whoever is here to really do it, like, they'll get it. And they'll like seek out the community to like ask, okay, how do I do this? And like, in that is almost like a forceful way of like making sure who gets into the community gets into the community. But it does create like some sort of like hard accessibility factors to it. But I think that who's ever really passionate to, you know, like uncover these things and to get into it, like, they always figure it out.
This is something that, you know, within our foundation, we're always like trying to solve these problems, I'd say, because most people just want to have the opportunity to, you know, to monetize from their work, to be able to drop their NFT and do all sorts of things associated with decentralization. But it's hard, you know, it's really, really hard. And this is something that we are really focusing on, like Joyce said, you know, you making sure it's user friendly, you know, making sure everything is accessible as much as possible. So that really sets us apart. And this, you know, one of the things that set our blockchain apart is called investable creative license, that actually captures value from the real world into the crypto space, you know, because currently, you know, people are like the crypto space, there's this sort of like individuals are sort of benefiting within the crypto space, and then there's the real world. But then how do we merge these two worlds, right, to create real economic value? And that really fascinates me a lot. I feel like I talk about that all the time. And so this is something that, you know, we're really excited about. And I wanted to say a quick definition on DeFi, because it came up and I wanted to share with our audience who might be wondering what DeFi stands for. So DeFi pretty much is decentralized finance, and it is a term given to financial services using decentralized money like certain cryptocurrencies that can be programmed for automated activity. So pretty much it kind of like removes a third person, you know, out of the equation. It is a system by which financial products become available on the public decentralized blockchain networks that makes them open to use, so you can pretty much transfer money around the world without going through middlemen like banks or financial institutions. So this is pretty cool, and I wanted to share that to our audience who might be interested. And hopefully, you know, you can, like Hannah said, you know, if you're driven and if you want to know more, you know, you can, you know, get into it and read more about it. So,
Yes,
yeah.
we had this one amazing girl on the other day, and she was from Ghana, and she said that, you know, she was a fashion designer in the 3D space. And I just remember her, she said like her laptop broke down, but she still managed to get clothes, and she still managed to do all these things, you know. And like you said, Hannah, like when you want to do something, like, and you're really dedicated to do something, then, you know, all these obstacles will kind of fade, or you will find a way to do it. And I think that is what we are like so proud of, that we have so many creators that are really striving right now. Another question for you, Hannah. I'm wondering, what are the things and projects you are really excited about, maybe looking into the future?
This is an exciting question.
I love the smile on your face.
So like, it's actually very relative to like the things that we're talking about. I'll probably be coming out with a micro podcast within these next couple of months, and a micro podcast is like a 1 minute long podcast on this new app called Beams. Anybody can really upload their stuff onto there. It's like a Spotify for podcasts, but it's going to be called Size Matters. And Size Matters, the name in itself, all the naming things like have to exist in like this Hoechitecture world, or like a provocative world of like where people will click on it just because they're interested in it. Size Matters is talking about like world building a provocative future on a variation of different scales, like whether it's world building on, okay, what is the attitude of the person in the world that you're creating? What is the clothing that they wear? What is the room that they live in, the city that they live in? Just like expanding on these like power of tens of like, what world are you building that's based off of like the synthesized world that we're in right now? So like kind of proposing something new to somebody every day within like a minute long, that they can think about something and then kind of like just go on about their day and think about how maybe the worlds might be different in that like small intention. That I'm excited for. I'm also just excited for that because like a lot of people will see my work. Sometimes I don't even like post a lot of my work, but they'll see it and it's still like a very aesthetically heavy thing because I'm a painter, or I was a painter. And a lot of people don't get to hear the theory that goes on behind it, or just like the things that I conceptualize, like really at the heart of it, like I'm a scientist properly. So these things they have depth and they have theory. And so like being able to like get these sound bites and to just like vocalize and communicate and just like almost affirm to yourself this like world that we're gonna create is like really exciting to just like talk more. Another project that I'm excited for is like I'll probably be building more like virtual spaces. I want to release something that's kind of like people will like purchase a room basically, and then like that room is basically like a guide point of how they would actually be able to design their room. I think a lot of times it's really hard to interior design a space because you almost want like a play-by-play book on like, okay, like let me get the inspiration and let me know where to buy it. But like being able to give somebody this aspirational dream image and go back to like this Barbie dream home style thing and being able to sell that render as an NFT, and then also using that as like a catalog of how to design your space or how you can live different, I think is going to be unique. And creating like this suburb, like this virtual suburb, is like going to be a big project this year.
This sounds amazing. Like, can't wait for the podcast. You know, it reminded me of something like Naval did, like with the 1 minute snippets. Also, I was just thinking, when you mentioned The Sims or Barbie world, what if in the future we're gonna be speed dating with Metaverse and a room that you designed like randomly with people, you know? Or I don't know, there's so many possibilities that you can create, even from an architectural standpoint, where you have so many different elements or spaces you can add that are not possible in real life, you know. It's exciting to hear.
Yes, we're looking forward to checking them all out. We'll be following you. So I came across this quote of yours that resonates with me very well, especially the part about giving knowledge to people who wouldn't necessarily have access to it and breaking it down in a way that is more digestible. Like this is the way I sort of understood it. And one of the many reasons I am so glad we have NewForum, you know, which serves as an educative tool and many more, you know, to our audience. So in your quote, I'm going to just say exactly how you said it. And it says, I'm big on giving knowledge to people who wouldn't necessarily have had the access, and breaking it down in a way that's really informative and engaging. Sometimes architecture can be condescending, especially for women and people of color. I don't think a lot of us realize how much we walk through our worlds and past things that were designed. I found that really, really incredible, you know, and I'd love, if you have anything you want to share about that, I think that would be great to hear.
I think like it goes back to just like a very cliche thing about like being grateful in your everyday life and like opening up yourself to gratitude. And it's really hard to be grateful when you're like, well, this is so ugly, like the world seems so ugly. But then if I like look to this like building behind me, you're like, wow, like being an intern in an architecture firm, I think really teaches you a lot, because you're like making all of these like little building models, and there's just such precision that goes into building these scale models. And so you're like, as an intern, you're like, wow, this is my whole world. Like, this is my whole, you know, if this fails, like, I'm not going to be an architect, or this fails, I'm not going to become, you know, who I want to be in that world. So like somebody made this building and like some intern was probably killing themselves over it. Like, I just like go back to how I was as an intern and thinking like, okay, like somebody really put in a lot of effort, and like knowing the types of, limitations that go on at a design studio, of the budgetary restrictions, the creativity the like inner complexities of teamwork and thinking, okay, well, they didn't get to do maybe the type of facade that they wanted to do, and that's not that cool. But like, you know, they were successful on these windows, and like somebody really did something to make this building happen. Like, I think is like an opportunity to be grateful that like somebody was gunning for something to be cool in the world, just like slightly cooler. And I think that when you're able to like walk around the world, even like I think my favorite example is like Best Buys. Like, I don't know if you have those out there, but like a Best Buy is basically like a technology store, and it's like designed, the facade is like designed a little bit weird. It's like kind of pointed, but you're like, wow, like somebody like tried to do something there. And like I admire that they tried. I admire it at least. And I think that when you're a little bit more keen on design and how things are made, it's really about how things are made. Like, you start to notice like little nuances. Like, you start to notice, okay, well, like the edge of my phone is rounded, it's not at a right angle. Like, people really had this intention and this attention to detail that like we should be thankful for, that like we could take a second out of our day to notice, instead of being like, okay, well, I hate everything. It's like, well, no, people really came together to make something. So I think that in terms of accessibility is a little bit different, because in a location that's not as beautiful, you're being a lot more keen on the details that are around you. And I think that when you're from a location that's maybe not as designed beautifully, you can also like have more attention to this detail and more like appreciation to this like higher life than somebody who's grown up around it in all times and kind of like takes it for granted. But it all goes back to like being grateful for like the world that we currently live in, and being like, okay, well, this building's not a building. Like, somebody really tried to do something that was somebody's passion. Like, these dreams like didn't just go to waste, like type of thing.
Yeah, I think this is very true. Gratitude and appreciation is something that, we're missing in our time, especially because we have a lot of things access to, we have a lot of we have access to a lot of things. And so we tend to take things for granted. And sometimes we're just, like you said, passing through things, and we actually forget that this was designed, this was like someone actually thought about this. This is someone else's passion, and so I think that's really great. And I feel like on the note of gratitude and appreciation, if you have any, key takeaway or any last few words you want to share with our audience, perhaps those who want to get into the 3D architectural space, anything at all you want to share with our audience, that would be awesome.
That's like so much openness. Like, I don't even I think I would say, like, if you want to get into a 3D space, or no matter what space that you want to go about it, like, go about it in terms of like a sci-fi. Like, everything that's ever created is like made off of this like fiction-esque world. It's made off of this fantasy world, and then scientists kind of go back in and they're like, okay, well, what if something did happen like how it happened in this fantasy book? And so like everything that we should be creating should be like, okay, well, what if things actually did look like this? And what if people actually did live like this? And I think that we're at a world where it's very mythological in a certain sense. Like, we are basically like creating this like Greek mythology, this like new age mythology for virtual worlds. And people should strive for that intention, and not strive to just make something that looks pretty, or maybe things that have shown already like proof of concept. Like, do things that have no proof of concept, like eradicate proof of concept.
That's the way to innovate. I'm thinking about all of these like years of architecture and design, and you really see like innovation, like you said, comes from trying something new and trying something different. Really love that.
Right. Designing with purpose. I feel like that's the essence I'm getting from what you're saying.
Don't overcomplicate like a lot of things. Like, I think a lot of people who design with purpose, or design with empathy, or design with like, I read so many biographies of like people that send me, or just people that I look up, and they're like, we have a design ethos, or like we design with ethos. I'm like, okay, so what is the ethos? Okay, so what is like, be descriptive and like go beyond that barrier of like a defining word and say what it really is. Because I wouldn't have been able to get to that level of Hoechitecture if it wasn't being like very distinct of like, okay, I didn't say that we design a provocative future for women, or we're including a like, that's just something that you get. Like, make sure that the visuals or the community or whatever you're making, just like use those things and don't try to overcomplicate it with design words, because that when it becomes inaccessible, and that's when it becomes condescending. I think that came up a lot in the question of like, you know, do I call it Hoechitecture? Like, what are people going to say? But like, I didn't really care, because the ones who get it. So strive more towards that than striving towards like really trying to overly define something, because that's when you get like messy and people can't understand it, or they try to poke too many holes into your idea.
Thank you so much for this advice. You know, we had such an awesome time with you, Hanna. Thank you for your time. We appreciate that, regardless of the situation that happened this morning. I'm still going to touch on that. You know, that's super awesome. That shows strength, and I admire that so much. So where can our listeners find you on your social media platforms? Because I'm sure they would love to follow you and see what you're up to.
Yeah, so you guys can follow me on Instagram. It's the Hanna Ali. And then of course, follow Hoechitecture. I'm also going to have the podcast that's going to come out on Beams. You can download the app, and then we'll have some new things this year, but mainly I'll post them on Hoechitecture.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much for being part of today's forum. If you also want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us also on Instagram. We are newcoin_NCO, and NewForum, we have a new Instagram as well. It's NewForum_NCO. And we also have a private Telegram group. We're going to link everything in the description down below. And if you have any questions, you can always message us there. And thank you guys so much for being part of today's episode. Salimi, Hanna, it was amazing. And yeah, we see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Oh, I forgot that. Need to put that in. Okay, thank you, Hanna.
Thank you. Bye.